Hello, I am the real-life fake wizard. Picture this if you will. You sit on your couch one night, the lights are low, the screen flickers on, and there in front of you is a franchise you've loved since childhood. The name is right, the aesthetic is familiar, the characters, or at least the characters bearing the same names, move through the worlds that look expensive and sound orchestral and carry all the visual markers of the thing you remember. But something is wrong. You can feel it. 15 minutes in, a quiet unease. 20 minutes in, a growing certainty. The characters don't speak the way they used to. They don't act the way they once did. The world doesn't operate by the rules it used to. The story is asking different questions than the ones that made you care in the first place. And the harder you look for the thing you loved, the further away it seems. So you change the channel. Another franchise, another familiar property, same feeling. The names are right, but the people are wrong. You change the channel again. A reboot of something you loved in the 90s. Same thing, different show, same hollow sensation. You open a different streaming app, a new adaptation of a book series you read as a kid, same weird discovery. Every channel, every service, every franchise, the same quiet wrongness wearing a different costume. And it hits you. This isn't one bad show. This isn't one studio making one mistake. This is all of them. Every franchise you cared about has been entered, occupied, and rebuilt from the inside by people who've kept the architecture but gutted the foundation. And as you sit on your couch, flipping through the wreckage of everything you used to love, wondering what happened, you go online to look for answers. And what you find are the writers and creators on social media celebrating themselves. The showrunners doing press tours explaining their bold new vision. The journalists writing glowing reviews about how the franchise has finally been updated for modern audiences. And all of them, every single one of them, points directly at you and says, if you don't like it, the problem is you. That you're too nostalgic. That you're too resistant to change. That you need to get over it. Sadly, my friends, this isn't the Twilight Zone. This is real life, and your favorite franchises have been culturally colonized.
Yes, yes.
Today's indie game shoutout is Savant Ascent Remix, an explosive shoot-'em-up, scrolling shooter starring an acrobatic wizard on an elevator ride. Unlock destructive spells and acrobatic moves as you survive through a tower brimming with robotic fiends. To learn more about this and hundreds of other indie games, visit our free indie game discovery network, fakeportal.com, or scan the QR code on your screen. Now back to the video. Let's start by properly defining the term cultural colonization. This is when a creator or studio takes an established property built on a specific set of values, themes, and identity and replaces those values with their own. Not builds upon it, not evolves it, but replaces it. This distinction matters because storytelling has always involved adaptation. Stories have always been told and then retold. Myths get reinterpreted across generations. Nobody owns a story forever. I understand that argument and I'm not dismissing it, but there is a fundamental difference between these activities that people keep conflating. Evolution builds on what came before. It respects the foundation. It extends the architecture. For instance, Batman going from campy 1960s detective to Frank Miller's Dark Knight is evolution. The character's core remains justice, trauma, the war on crime, but the expression deepens. The audience recognizes Batman in both versions because the identity survived the transition. That is adaptation. That is how storytelling is supposed to work across generations. But colonization replaces what came before. The foundation is demolished, the architecture is torn down, and something new is built on top of that rubble, wearing the old name like a mask. The original identity doesn't survive, it is overwritten. And the audience, the people who loved the original, are told that the new version is an improvement, that their attachment to the old version is a problem, and they need to get with the times. I have lots of examples to really break this down, but having spent a lot of time watching Star Trek Starfleet Academy recently and seeing the direct damage done each week to this franchise, I want to start here as this is the case study of outlining the issues. Star Trek was built on one of the most brilliant premises in television history, a future where fundamentally different cultures coexist while remaining fundamentally different. Klingons valued honor and combat above everything else. Their entire civilization was organized around warrior culture. They sang songs about glorious battles and measured a person's worth by how they fought and how they died. And the show didn't tell you that this was wrong. It showed you a society built on those principles, and it let you, the viewer, think about what it all meant. Vulcans valued logic and emotional discipline. They had systematically suppressed their emotions because their species was once so violent that it nearly destroyed itself. Logic was an entire civilization's answer to the question, how do we stop ourselves from self-destructing? And the show respected that answer, again, allowing you to think about it yourself and come to your own conclusions. Ferengi valued commerce and profit, an entire species organized around the belief that trade, negotiation, and wealth creation were the highest forms of societal contribution. Romulans valued secrecy and strategy. Every species in Star Trek was a thought experiment, even the Borg, a philosophical position given a face and a culture and a history. And the genius of this show, the thing that made it genuinely important television, was that it explored those positions without flattening them. It didn't correct them. It didn't say Klingons would be better if they were more like humans. It asked a question: what can we learn from people who see the world completely differently than we do? It's questions like that that made Star Trek matter. Not the phasers and warp drives and the space itself, right? More so, who, not what, was to be discovered in space. What do civilizations look like when they're built on principles that are alien to your own? And can you engage with that civilization respectfully, even when you disagree? Today, that philosophy is dead within this property. In Discovery, in Starfleet Academy, in the modern Star Trek shows, every alien species might look different. The makeup is there, the prosthetics are there, but the cultures, the belief systems, the values that made each species distinct have been sanded down and smoothed over until every character virtually sounds the same. They all sound like someone living in Los Angeles in 2025, with 2025 values and 2025 priorities and 2025 emotional vocabulary. Each species I just named, and all those I didn't name, no longer embody the values that made their species originally unique. Instead, they all carry the weight of the writer's singular world view. Every alien culture has become a slightly different shade of the same gray matter. Different faces, but the same person underneath. Now, the scary thing here, and the reason why we're talking about this at all, is because the way this is presented. Anyone who thinks or believes differently than the writers, even in alien science fiction, is presented as wrong. Not just different, not just misguided, wrong, in need of being corrected. The character who holds a traditional belief must be educated. The culture that operates differently must be reformed. You must think as I think. You must believe as I believe. And that is dangerous. A story that cannot imagine any legitimate perspective other than its own isn't telling a story anymore. The writers are lecturing to the audiences that all worldviews must become their version of reality, and lectures don't change minds, especially in this way. This is a fast-track way to alienate audiences, and they have. In this instance, the writers have colonized the franchise. They moved into someone else's creation, tore out everything that made it unique, and rebuilt it in their own image, and then they call it progress. Now, if this were just Star Trek, it would be a Star Trek problem. Unfortunate for Star Trek fans, but contained. However, it's not contained. There's a pattern here, and once you see it, you kinda can't unsee it. Look at Star Wars. Luke Skywalker. Think about what this character means, not just to you, but also to storytelling. Luke believed in redemption so deeply, so fundamentally, that he refused to kill Darth Vader, a man who had murdered children, tortured his best friend, and tortured his sister, and helped enslave the entire galaxy. This man is responsible for the pain and suffering the galaxy has known Luke's entire life. But Luke was able to look at this man and still say, there is still good in you. And he was right. His belief, his compassion, turned Vader back to the light. It's one of the most powerful moments in cinema. It defined a generation's understanding of what a hero can be and what redemption might look like. And the writers who inherited that character rewrote Luke as a nihilistic hermit who considered murdering his teenage nephew in his sleep because he sensed darkness might be inside of him. The man who redeemed Darth Vader tried to kill a sleeping child. This is not evolution. Luke Skywalker's evolution would build on his belief in redemption. It would test it. It would put it under pressure and see if it held. Maybe it breaks, maybe it doesn't, but the character engages with his own defining trait. What they did was replacement. They didn't build on what George Lucas created. They bulldozed it. They tore it down and constructed their own character on the foundation and slapped Luke's name on top of it. The writers didn't evolve Luke Skywalker. They colonized him. How about The Witcher on Netflix? Henry Cavill clashed repeatedly with writers who wanted to depart from the books. Think about the arrogance of this. The star of your show, a man who loves the material so much he corrects lore on set, is telling you the scripts are moving away from the source, and the writers chose their vision over his, over the books, and over the audience. So Cavill left. He walked away from one of the biggest roles in television because the writers valued their own ideas more than the thing that they were hired to adapt. The show recast Geralt and kept going, but it won't be going for much longer. The message here, sadly, is that the writer's ego take priority over the source material, the star, and every fan who shows up. Rings of Power. Tolkien's stories in Middle-earth are rooted in his worldview with mythology, Catholic theology, and a pre-modern moral framework, and all of that is replaced systematically with contemporary sensibilities. Now, interestingly, many people online, myself included, have often judged Rings of Power for appealing to the modern audience. You know, it's made for the modern audience. This isn't actually true, and I'm correcting my own record now. Rings of Power isn't actually for the modern audience. If we're to properly define the modern audience as the viewing public of the current day, then no, Rings of Power isn't for the general viewing public. But do you know what is? Peter Jackson's adaptations from 2001 are. Peter Jackson's 6 films are for the modern audience. He committed to Tolkien's language. He respected the world's internal logic, and those films are timeless, with The Lord of the Rings being the greatest film trilogy ever made. And Peter Jackson said something that I think might be the most important single quote in this entire conversation. It's something that not nearly enough people point to. He said, quote, "We made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics, our own messages, or our own themes into these movies. What we were trying to do was analyze what was important to Tolkien and try to honor that. We were trying to make these films for him, not for ourselves. For him. And not for ourselves." That, my friends, is stewardship. That is what it looks like when someone receives a legacy property and treats it as a responsibility rather than a platform. Jackson made changes, he adapted, he cut entire sections of the books, but the identity is very much still there. Because he understood that Tolkien's work was bigger than he was. His job was to serve Tolkien's vision, not replace it with his own. Rings of Power does the opposite. The show doesn't serve Tolkien, it colonizes Tolkien's world. It uses Middle-earth as a backdrop for stories Tolkien wouldn't have written, wouldn't have endorsed, and wouldn't recognize as his own. The name is Tolkien, the name is Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings. The product is someone else's entirely. How about Velma? A Scooby-Doo show where the creator publicly said she didn't want to include Scooby-Doo. You can call it a satire if you please, but I'll call it what it really is: sacrilege. She took one of the most recognizable brands in animation with 60 years of built-in audience love, stripped out everything that made it what it was, not even just the Scooby-Doo not being in the Scooby-Doo show issue, and then used the brand name to platform something entirely unrelated. Mindy Kaling colonized the stories and culture of Scooby-Doo. See, it's a pattern. It's not one franchise, it's not one studio, it's not one genre. It's an industry-wide phenomenon where the people entrusted with legacy properties treat those properties as things to be claimed or captured. So why then? Why do writers who are handed beloved franchises immediately try to replace the thing that made them beloved? I think there are two answers. One is uncomfortable and one is obvious. The obvious answer is corporate. Studios acquire IP because IP has built-in audiences. Built-in audiences reduce marketing risk. A new original show has to find its viewers from scratch, which is harder to do and risky. A Star Wars show has millions of people who will tune in on name recognition alone, or at least they used to at one point in the past. The business incentive is to use the brand as a vehicle for whatever content the studio wants to produce, because the brand provides the audience that an original idea would have to earn. The IP is the delivery mechanism. What's inside the package is whatever the studio's current creative leadership wants it to be. The uncomfortable answer is about the writers themselves. Many of the writers attached to these projects are not strong enough to create original work that stands on its own. So they need a host. They need the built-in audience. They need the name. And once they have access to the name, once they're inside the franchise, they do what any colonizer does. They replace the existing culture with their own. I believe there is provable malice at times for this, like the iconic image of a Lucasfilm employee having a photo of Luke Skywalker with his face crossed out on her desk. Many of these people hate what came before because what came before doesn't align with their vision of human morality. So they often believe they're improving things, but they can only write from one perspective, their own, lacking either the ability or the humility to subordinate their perspective to the original creator's vision. Peter Jackson had the humility to say, for him, not for ourselves. Denis Villeneuve has shown the same reverence for Frank Herbert, staying faithful to the spirit of Dune while making changes that serve the adaptation. These are filmmakers who understood that they were guests in someone else's world, that their job was to translate and not to replace. The colonizers don't see it that way. They see the franchise as raw material, as a platform. It's just a set of assets, characters, worlds, brand recognition that can all be reproduced to tell their own stories. And their own stories always look the same. Their stories always sound like them because that's all they have. And what the original creator built, the thing that millions of people loved for decades, becomes collateral damage in someone else's career. There is a cost to this cultural colonization, and the cost is creativity and the death of genuine diversity of thought in storytelling. Old Star Trek had more real diversity than anything on television today because of how the characters would think, not because of their physical appearance. A Klingon thought differently than a Vulcan, who thought differently than a Ferengi, who thought differently than a human. And the show made you engage with all of those perspectives. It made you sit with worldviews that were alien to your own and find the logic in them. That is what diversity actually looks like in storytelling. Characters who think differently, who challenge your assumptions, who make you feel a little uncomfortable, and then force you to ask, could they be right? When every character in a show shares the writer's worldview, regardless of species, regardless of culture, regardless of the fictional world they inhabit, you haven't created diversity. Actually, you're actively destroying diversity. You've taken a universe that was built to contain infinite possibilities and compressed it into a single perspective wearing different expensive costumes. And the audience can feel it. They feel it before they can name it. Maybe they don't even have a name to express it. They don't know how to express these emotions. The show doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the thing they once loved. Something is off, something has been hollowed out, and they can't explain what it is, but the absence is tangible, right? Because the thing they loved was a world with room for different ideas, and the thing they got now is a world where only one idea is allowed. The franchises that I grew up on, and many of you grew up on, like Doctor Who, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, video games too, right? Movies, television, it's stories in general now that are being hijacked, that are being colonized. The properties that shaped how I think about storytelling and the world, right? And you too. They mattered because they contained ideas bigger than any single writer and also any single viewer. They were bigger than us on an individual level. They mattered because they imagined futures where worlds and different perspectives coexisted and clashed and learned from each other. And those ideas are being systematically replaced by people who don't understand them, who either don't respect them or actively want to see them dismantled and eradicated. Sadly, these are people who don't have the ability to create something original that would earn the audience these franchises already have. So they move in. They plant their flag, they tear down what was built, and replace it with just themselves. And then they call it adaptation. They call it evolution. They call it modernization. It's not. It's colonization. And you have every right to name it what it is. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well. And for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. Goodbye.